The rent debt tsunami. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee, because I'd like to have a look at this article from ABC Triple J, discussing deferred rents that could push thousands of renters out of housing. And this is the next tsunami or cliff that we are going to face. Well, when the moratorium on rental evictions ends, we're going to have a rent debt tsunami. And if we just jump here to this article, this is another one from the ABC, but an interesting takeaway is up to a third of rent, and this is a few months ago, up to a third of rent relief agreements could be deferrals. Since the start of the pandemic, researchers have feared that renters could end up with large debts if they're offered a deferral in rent payments instead of a short-term cut to their rents. Because it has been left to individual landlords and tenants to negotiate agreements, no one knows for sure how many tenants have put off payments that will have to start paying back. New data, accessed by researchers at the University of New South Wales and shared with RM Breakfast, shows that in some states, up to 1/3 in rental agreements that were altered have seen deferrals instead of cuts to rent. New South Wales, between March and June, 35% of the 49 agreements were deferrals. In Queensland, 27% of the 297 agreements were deferrals. And in Victoria, 12% of 200 variation agreements were deferrals. So we're starting to see a significant portion of these are deferrals. So what happens when the moratorium is up? When the deferrals change back to normal rent, plus all the debt you've got loaded there, and then we start winding back on all the stimulus, because it can't go on forever. Well, we'll have to see. It may go on for our lifetimes. Technically, that's not forever. We'll have to see, guys. Are we in the age of never-ending stimulus now? Wait till we crack negative interest rates. So, when Ash lost her tourism job at the start of the pandemic, she knew she wasn't going to be able to make her rent payments. This is the problem. It just comes down to, again and again, not... ABC have a particular bias. You may not be aware of that. Let's just say it's, left-leaning. Okay? They will generally take the side of the victim in most circumstances, which I appreciate. I mean, people are losing their jobs, no fault of their own, but there's never any mention of developing the skills to prepare for this type of unforeseen disaster. There's no mention of ever having a rainy day fund. How are people going to learn about it if it isn't even mentioned in any of the newspaper articles that they're reading? How are people going to think, oh, wait a minute? No, they'll just be fed this constant one-sided argument blaming the evil landlords. Maybe the landlords don't even have, we've read articles as well about how they're struggling to make their payments to the banks. Some of them aren't very wealthy, guys. The problem is everyone is a landlord in Australia pretty much, so you get a good cross-section there too. The landlords should have savings as well to meet 6 months of payments. I know it's not going to happen. I'm keep coming back to it because I want to find out a way how we can make it cool and get young people interested. I know I'm probably just being naive there, guys. Maybe I'm going to put it on POGs. Do kids still do POGs? Let me know in the comments. As soon as she was let go, she contacted her real estate agent to try and sort things out. I was really trying to pay as much as I could, she said. They didn't really want to negotiate. Even though Ash's industry has been practically decimated, well, it's been more than decimated this year, her real estate agent and landlord weren't sympathetic. Eventually, they took her to mediation. They didn't contact Consumer Affairs for a very long time, till the end of June, so by the time Consumer Affairs got involved, there was a giant gap in the rent. Now Ash is facing $8,000 debt without a job, as she continues to try and negotiate a fair agreement with her landlord. Thousands are potentially facing eviction. Back in March, a 6-month moratorium on evictions was put in place for Australians who lost work during the pandemic and haven't been able to pay rent. But for tenants like Ash, who have been put off their payments, or who've had to put off their payments, that wasn't the end of the problem. Exactly, it isn't. Thousands of Australians are now shouldering big debts to their landlords, and close to 1 million of them could be at risk of being booted out of their homes because they aren't able to pay them off, according to new analysis. Well, if that starts happening, you'll start to see the market adjust. Because if you've got 1 million people on the streets, there's going to be a lot of property on the streets. So prices are going to start falling for rental. Now, this is the thing. If you want a cheaper real estate market, if you want housing, cost of living, cost of accommodation to become more affordable, you need to let this play out. You need to not intervene. You need to let the people have to bankrupt. You have to get people kicked out, and you have to let landlords realize that if they treat people like crap, they're going to potentially lose their property as well. If you step in to try and regulate it, it's going to be worse in the long run. You're just going to exacerbate the problems that we have now. Can you see there being political will in Australia for the necessary hardship to allow the market to correct? That's a question I put to you there. Can you see it happening? Joel Dignam from community organisation Better Renting, who produced the analysis, says he's worried about what the next few months will mean for people as facing rent debt as eviction moratoriums come to an end. Renters haven't in many situations been evicted for rental debt during the height of the pandemic, but many of them might have accrued debt which could still be a millstone around their neck as eviction moratoriums are lifted, he said. That accrued debt could lead to renters being evicted even if their income hasn't bounced back to pre-pandemic levels. A lot of the evictions won't be formal evictions that will go to the tribunal. It's probably actually a minority where the landlord sends you a letter in the mail, you go to tribunal, you hash it out and maybe end up having your lease terminated. A lot of that will be more informal, where people end up moving under duress, they're under a lot of pressure, they don't want to keep dealing with it, they'll still have that debt there. For renters like Ash, having a debt and potential eviction hanging over their heads is putting a strain on physical and mental health. Well, that's life. I mean, life is a strain on physical and mental health. That's why you need to have sufficient reserves in order to allow you to do that. That's why people drawing upon their superannuation to make these payments, I know that everyone's going to say, oh, but it's, taking from their retirement saving. That's their emergency fund, guys. That's the 10% we're meant to put aside for 6 months rainy fund. The government forces you to stick that in super. So I don't blame people drawing upon that when they need to. What's more important, having some money when you're 60, probably 70 or 80 when they let you touch it, and living with years of stress and mental health issues? So it doesn't even really feel nice to sleep there anymore because I don't really feel welcome or wanted there. I feel a bit afraid in my own home. I can understand that. I'm just having to just take it day at a time, or it's just so much, or it gets really stressful. When I get really stressed, my back spasms pretty badly. It's been really confusing because I feel like I've done as much as I could. Yeah, I know, but it may not be enough. So, turning to friends, family, and unions for help. For tenants that have managed to pay off debts to their landlord, their problem hasn't entirely gone away either. A lot of people have had a big financial hit. They've done everything they could to avoid getting into debt at all, but do not want to be in debt. But people do not want to be in debt, says Jordan. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. Look at Afterpay. Look at credit cards. Look at all the consumer crap people buy. People want debt. People use debt. That's a fantasy. Maybe they want debts on their terms. That's what they want. They feel like they shouldn't be responsible for an agreement they made. Maybe they've had to draw on their super, or they've used some other savings, borrowed money from their family or friends, or they've just really cut back on essentials to make sure they can keep paying their bills and keep paying their rent. That was exactly what Sebastian did when he was facing a deferred rent debt after losing his entertainment job. I had to basically call in favors from family and friends, he said. I'm in debt, but better being in debt to family and friends than a landlord. It's unpleasant to do when you're trying to kind of make it on your own way, and just these kind of decisions just made that almost entirely out of your control. After Sebastian had paid back almost 2 months worth of rent, he did manage to negotiate a temporary reduction, but only after months of back and forth, taking his landlord to consumer affairs. Well, mate, you're probably going to have to better move. Just say, sorry. There's this level of anxiety that sits over everything you're doing, he says. The end result, I was able to get a reduction up until the end of this year. For tenants unable to hit up family and friends for financial help, organisations like the Renters and Housing Union has been providing assistance. It's made a huge difference for Ash, who found out that her debt may not be legal. They have helped find a pro bono lawyer who would look into it for me because I was just going to do what they said and just borrow as much money as I could and get out. I don't know what I would have done without them, to be honest, because legal aid was swamped. And so was all the other places that are free. Well, you could just cough up $500. Okay. Lawyers aren't cheap and you got to pay for it still. Sometimes I was on hold for like 6 hours on a few days, just when I didn't know what to do or who to reach out to. So there is a role for governments. The moratoriums have to lift at some point, says Joel. What we're most concerned about is the moratorium being lifted without a plan for dealing with rental debt. Then we're going to see pretty bleak impacts on people. Joel says there are two key things governments should do to make sure renters don't end up evicted after facing COVID hardship. One, maintaining increased level of income support like JobKeeper and JobSeeker again. And we'll probably have RentKeeper. We're going to see RentKeeper up here. That was the difference between being in poverty and being able to put food on the table. It's pretty short-sighted to think of this government and cruel planning to cut that further as we... okay, sure. And two, potentially taking on some of the debt. Why is it always government to the... I mean, government caused the damage. Maybe that's what we're seeing here. So we are all of us now are going to be held accountable for the reckless decisions of the government. And two, potentially taking on some of the debt. We do think there's a role for governments to look at the rental debt, and that already exists, and say we can't possibly force renters to pay this. It's just not possible for so many renters. It's going to put them under huge stress. It's going to lead to evictions. What we've proposed in our report is governments can actually buy the debts from landlords, in effect becoming the creditor, and then the government can decide not to collect that money from the renters. So, more propping up of the property sector, guys. Yeah, that's it. This is essentially handouts for landlords. That's what it is. It's being dressed up as saving the renters. It's handouts for landlords. That's what it is. It's going to inflate property. If you want cheaper housing, if you want cheaper rents, you need to let it correct. And the correction isn't going to be all nice and roses and bloody puppies. It's going to be tough. People are going to get evicted. People are going to be kicked out. Arsehole landlords are going to get screwed and they're going to lose their buildings. Okay? The good ones will do what they can to keep their tenants because they're smart. But you need the bastards to cop it. And the government swooping in means it's not going to happen. So it's just going to be more of the same stuff. So this is the problem. This is the problem. When you're too soft, when you're too nice, when you don't let the market adjust and punish people for one, not having savings, and two, for being a complete twat to your tenants, it's just going to be more of the same. What do you reckon, everyone? What do you think? Do you like these ideas? Or do you think we're just too soft to actually allow the market to correct? So we're going to have de facto support, financial support for landlords. Just what Australia needs now with that bloody housing sector. And then the same people will be doing articles about why is housing so expensive? Why is rent so high? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and want to support the content I create here, there are a few ways you can. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using affiliate links at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or Kucoin, or AussieBroadband. You can buy merch from Teespring or HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, everyone. I'll see you next time.